down. Gonna get rid of that though.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. We're probably just a minute or two away from starting. If you just bear with us, we'll just wait for the trickle of people joining us now that we've just hit 5.
Hi, Owen.
All right, we got a good chunk of the RSVPs, so we might get rolling, and I'm sure people will join us as they come through. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Just as we start, just would want to acknowledge that we're meeting, well, I'm today on the lands of the Wadjuk Noongar people, but acknowledge that we've got people from across Western Australia and even a few national people who have come in to join us. So I just want to acknowledge the custodians of the land and elders past and present. This is one of WAM's workshop series that we conduct about 20 times a year. This one is particularly a well-attended one because it's about funding and the new Contemporary Music Fund funding, which has recently just been relaunched by the now rebranded Department of Creative Industries, Tourism and Support, or CITS. That will roll off my tongue soon, but isn't quite there yet as compared to the old DLGSC. And I'm very pleased today to have both Allison Archer and Pat McLaughlin from the DLGSC joining us today to brief you on this funding. For those of you who haven't met, I'm Owen Whittle. I'm the CEO of WAM. And just before I start, would just like to say that after this presentation today, if you've got any questions, we'll address them at the end of the meeting, but also that WAM is also available each and every day to kind of receive inquiries around funding and talk to you about your needs as artists and to maybe help interpret, where the best avenues may be to achieve funding, whether that's with the state or the federal governments. But that's probably enough from me. I'll pop back in towards the end and curate a bit of a kind of participant Q&A, and very pleased to hand over to our friends at the CITS. So thank you.
Cool. Hey everybody. As Owen said, my name's Pat. I am a project officer for investment here in the department. I've been here for about 4 years, and I specialise in contemporary music. Prior to working for the department, I've been involved in music for a long time as an artist, playing in bands, doing all the stuff that you'll be doing, releasing and touring, etc. And I've also worked in different parts of the music industry, in the live side of things, and also in working for APRA collecting royalties. This is my colleague Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison. So I don't have a background in contemporary music, but I'm the senior project officer looking after a lot of our grant programs here, including the Contemporary Music Fund. And my background is more in visual arts, managing art galleries, managing events, and writing and researching. I'll hand you back to Pat.
Cool. Okay, so basically what we're going to go through today is we want to go through, there's various avenues you can apply for funding through the department to get money for contemporary music projects. So we'll give you an overview of what those programs are. We'll give you an overview of what the process is about how it works. Some key steps in preparing a grant application. It takes a bit of work and it's a bit to know. So we'll just kind of give you a bit of background on that. And then things to avoid and also tips to make it stronger. So maybe just keep your questions till the end and then, we'll open the floor and we can go from there. So essentially, the programs that you can apply for contemporary music funding in the department, there's the Contemporary Music Development Program, which we've just opened, which we'll go into more detail about. There's the Arts Projects for Individuals and Groups and Arts Projects for Organisations programs that you may be aware of. They've been running for a couple of years. And then we've also got two more opportunities that have started. So there's the Creative WA internships and the Creative WA fellowships. So all of those five are possibilities for you to get funding from the government. So it's what's important when you start in this journey is to basically have a look through the guidelines, and it's a really important thing that we will repeat and emphasize a lot, because all the information you need is in those guidelines, and it will help you determine which path you want to take in terms of applying for the funding. Sorry. Okay, so the Contemporary Music Fund, there's been various iterations of the Contemporary Music Fund over the years, but this current version started in 2018 as an election commitment. It was initially a 3-year commitment, and then it was extended 4 years beyond that, and it was $3 million over that time. Great news this year, in the election we had earlier this year, the government announced more money. So we're getting the 3 million that we had before, but also another 1.5 million that goes into the grants, which we'll be talking about. And they also included some money for WAM and RTR to do put together a gig guide and use it for promoting WA acts. And there was also some money for WAM for their festival. So it was a much bigger commitment than it's been, which is really positive. So that's great for everybody here. The reason why that's significant is that it's its own pool of money. So essentially, when all the art forms can apply for money through the department, but contemporary music has its own pool. And that means that the objectives are more specific to this art form. And it means there's an emphasis on the government wanting to push, knowing that, there's a good rewards and there's a lot of talent here to push. So it's a really good thing. So it's essentially the idea behind the funding is to have a thriving sector, a thriving scene where, that creates jobs for people, that creates careers. And then, obviously that returns to the state in many ways. So, it's making sure that, we've got a strong, healthy sector here, which we do, which is really cool. Okay, so basically the new program that we've just released is called the Contemporary Music Fund Development Program. And you may have applied for funding or know about programs in the past. There was the U15K a couple of years ago, and then there's the Contemporary Music Fund SNAP program. This is neither of those. It's kind of an amalgamation of those, but it's important to know that it's a new program. So whatever you know about the old ones, pivot, this is the new, it's slightly different. So essentially what's important in this program is how is this project that you're presenting to the department career defining or career changing? So is it timely? Is it something that's happening? Have you got things going on that this can help? Basically, if you're in this position with this funding, it can push you to the next position. So that's important when you're looking at how you're going to apply and when you're going to apply. It's not a case of, I want to do some recording, I'll just apply. You've got a better chance of being successful when it's sort of coexisting with other things that you're doing. So that's important to know. The good thing about it is it's really broad. So it's essentially covers the majority of the things that an artist would usually need. So it's the recording side of things, the mixing, mastering, the releasing. Maybe you want to do publicity campaigns, you want to do videos, maybe you want to tour in many forms, your own tour, support tours, playing at conferences, touring, supporting other bands. And there's also professional development opportunities. Maybe you've been invited to do a special songwriting activity or work with someone high profile or stuff like that. So it's pretty broad. And what we would recommend is that if you're unfamiliar or you're not sure, just give us a call and speak to one of us. And then that way you can kind of ascertain, is it going to suit this problem, this sort of project you want to do. So the details of this program go, it's for grants for up to $20,000. It's open currently, so open on the 8th of July and it goes till the 4th of December. It'll close over Christmas and then open in January and go till June again next year. And it will be like that each year. You can apply twice in a financial year, but you can be successful once. So especially this will be applicable to people who are maybe new to applying that, writing a grant, it's not something that's easy to do first up. So it does give you the leeway. If you have an unsuccessful application, you can go again. You must apply from 28 days out from your project. So that's the minimum time, but you can apply further out if you need to, and we recommend you do if you can, because it takes 28 days for us to notify you. So if it's on the deadline of 28 days, you might not know before you start, or it's as you're starting your project. So if it's a touring scenario, that can affect you're paying for things. And once you are notified, if you are successful, there's still another couple of weeks there because of the payment side of things and contracting. So, but we've left it at that short date to know that sometimes things come up quickly and you want to respond. So it's important that, you're able to do that. So yeah, just keep those things in mind. But that's the basic gist of this program. I'll hand over to Allison. She can talk about our bigger programs.
Yeah. So whilst the new Contemporary Music Fund program is really exciting, great opportunities, and it funds lots of things, all contemporary music, don't forget that we also have the arts projects for individuals and groups and arts projects for organisations funding programs. Now, these are for your much bigger projects where 20,000 just might not be enough. And so, you might think a major international tour. And this is really for bands and musicians who have reached that point in their career where they really need to launch themselves into that international scene, or to do really high quality recording, distribution, marketing, promotional activities. So these programs run concurrently because we know some bands are registered as organisations, but of course some bands or individual musicians can come in under the individuals and groups program. So both grant programs run 3 times a year, and the next round opens next week on the 5th of August. The funding round is only open for 5 weeks, so it's not like our CMF one that's open for like 5 months. So you only get 5 weeks to get your application in, but you can apply for up to $80,000. So it's a significant amount of money, and we quite often see, anything from, 10 right up to $70,000 grant applications from our contemporary music sector. The other thing to keep in mind, and this makes it different from our old CMF SNAP grants, is that you must provide or contribute 20% income, and that's the same for our new contemporary music development program. Now, these grants are very, very competitive. We get between 200 and 300 applications over that 5 weeks. So if you are considering applying, do reach out, do chat to us. And you need to be really highly organised for this one because it does take 12 weeks from the round closing to notification. Okay, another two very exciting new programs we've just launched are the Creative WA internships and the Creative WA fellowships. So the Creative WA internships are for organisations to employ somebody for 12 months, or I think it's 10 to 12 months, as an intern to really learn a lot and network and it can really be a significant career opportunity for a young person or recent graduate. These programs are currently open and they're open for 5 weeks as well. The fellowships has 2 categories, and these are the ones that individual musicians, artists can apply for. And there's 2 categories. One is for artists and that includes musicians, of course, that have at least 5 years professional practice. And then we also have fellowships for young people. So the fellowships for the established artists are $50,000 for your year, and the one for young people is $26,000. All the guidelines are on our website. And again, if you're interested in finding out any more about those opportunities, please just pick up the phone and give us a call. Our contact details will be at the end of this presentation. Okay, so basically, we're going to have a chat now about demystifying the grant process, because we know it can be really overwhelming for new applicants. But we are here to help, and we've seen so many cases of people applying and being ineligible, being unsuccessful, who, 12 months down the track are writing our strongest, most successful applications. So don't give up, get some advice and just keep trying. So just quickly looking at what happens to your application after you submit it. The new Contemporary Music Development Program is assessed internally. And so, as Pat said, that has a much quicker turnaround of 28 days as compared to the arts projects for individuals and groups and arts projects for organisations, which take 12 weeks to process. And it takes that long because basically they are assessed externally by your peers. And if you are interested in being a peer assessor, do reach out and contact us. And our larger grants also have to be approved by the minister. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of government processes. So keeping all of that in mind, basically all of our grants are assessed to the same criteria, whether they're assessed internally or externally. So I'll hand you over to Pat to provide a bit more detail about that.
Okay, so in the process, essentially, as Allison said, there's for you to be successful in this process, you've got to get the actual grant side of it right. Even if the actual project or opportunity is really good, you've still got to get that part right. There's often 2 ways that assessors will look at it, and so you don't want to be letting the grant side of thing, which is the boring side of things, let you down from your cool thing that you're trying to do. So essentially what it's made up of is you'll have there's core questions, there's 7 of them. That sort of explains what, when, why, how, and it's sort of asking you about your project. There's the project outputs, which you're not actually assessed on, but that information really helps the department gather information about what's happening in the sector, and then the research team do a lot with that data, and the minister can use that if they need to reference the bigger side of what's happening in the sector. So it's good if you can give us that information, as much as that as possible is really good for the whole process. And then there's the budget. You'll have to submit a budget, and this is often where people have a lot of trouble. So I will talk a bit more about it, but you can call and talk to us if you're having trouble. And then there's the support material. So those are the things that you've the different elements you need in presenting a grant to us. So essentially, this is what it comes down to. The key to being successful in this whole process is these 4 things. And what happens is an assessor, when they're assessing, will look at these four criteria: quality, reach, good planning, and financial responsibility, and they'll score it out of a 7. Now, if you want to be successful in this process, you need to be 5+ generally, higher the better. So with the larger grant rounds that Allison was talking about before, essentially when the assessors assess, they get ranked from top to bottom. So essentially they have to put it as in the strongest application from scoring to the bottom. So you want to be near the top. So it's all great having a wonderful idea and a wonderful project, but you need to demonstrate these 4 things in able to be successful. So when we talk about quality, what that's looking at is it's looking at the quality of the opportunity or the project, so what you're doing. It's also looking at the quality of the applicant and what they've done or what they're trying to do, and the quality of the people that are involved. And then it's also looking at the timeliness or the relevance in that artist's career that this project has. So as I was saying before, if you're looking to tour, what's preceded that? Have you released some music? Have you done any kind of campaign? Maybe it's a case of if you want to record, it's off the back of a really successful tour or a bunch of shows or something that's leading you to this point. And then after you do this, you can then go again and take another big step. So quality is the highest rated in terms of between the 4, how they kind of rate in the percentage. So you really want to nail that one down. What you're looking at sort of putting in there with support materials is sort of a history, like a bio, showing the quality of your music, what you've done, explaining if there's other people involved, why they are legitimate or why they are of a high quality. Maybe you've got some media reviews, maybe you've got some letters from people, WAM write letters. Anyone who can give you an endorsement or that is reputable is going to help to give you a higher score in that area. Reach is looking at your audience engagement. So it's interesting when you talk to people, some people struggle to get this point across, but I think with the way that social media works now and streaming, it's probably the easiest one to demonstrate. It doesn't have to be a huge reach. It's not just on numbers. It's sort of, have you got an audience? Who is your audience? What does that look like? And then how are you going to reach them? So it's a case of, as an artist, you want to grow your audience so that you can, hopefully it earns to more income and enables you to have a career and a bigger reach of, bigger shows, all that stuff. It depends what you're trying to achieve. I don't want to put any limitation on that, but generally that's what happens. So we want to see in the application, or an assessor wants to see, is what does that look like? Have you got a plan for that? And if so, what is the plan? It's not a case of I'm just going to release my music and see what happens. We've seen, obviously, with the amount of online content there is, that'll get lost. So you want to target a plan. If you're using a publicist, you don't have to, but if you are, who are they and what are they doing? So it's sort of looking at those metrics. And so I always say to people, say you're at this point, at the end of it, or at the end of the project or a period of time, what does it look like? So are you growing your reach? Is it expanding? What's happening? So that's really important. Good planning is pretty straightforward. It's just letting the assessor know that you have a really good understanding of how to deliver this in a successful way. You have a good idea of a timeline, what the different facets are involved in a project. So if it's a recording and release situation, there's many different sort of steps in that. So it's outlining, does this person have a strong understanding of how that works and how time works in relation to the other things that are happening. And then it's confirming all the significant people. So if you're going to work with Joe Blob, recording with them, you want to confirm that in there. If you're going to work with this promoter, whatever it is, if you're confirmed to play shows at a venue or a conference or something, you put in the support material, you say, I'm going to play at this event, and here is the proof that I'm doing that. So it's just the really practical stuff of understanding it's a project you're outlining here. It's not so much a creative pursuit in writing a grant. It's showing that you've got a business idea of how you're going to execute a project successfully. And then financial responsibility is the budget. And it's essentially looking at what's reasonable, what's industry standard. So we don't put caveats on what things should cost. it's up to you to explain what they cost and justify why you've used that. So there's different metrics you can use online in terms of using pay, like certain rates, or sometimes it's to do with maybe you're going to use this engineer who costs more than the average engineer, but I need to use this person because they create this sound that's reputable and that's going to help me achieve my goals. So as long as it's justified and it's not ridiculous, it's okay. So you need to demonstrate that. So it's important that you put a lot of information about that in there, because there's nothing worse than just seeing a bunch of generic costs. So be quite specific with it. And yeah, it's just as an assessor, you're looking at, is this good value for investment? That's what you're looking for. Is this a project that's worth what it costs? So you want to really go into a lot of detail. If you're having trouble with it, as I said, don't just submit it and say, oh, I wasn't sure, please call. In-kind expenditure seems to be a really big issue that people have. And that is basically when you get something for free that would cost something. You can put the value of it. What is really important as well, and the department is big on it, and as the government, we should be doing that, is make sure you pay yourselves. There's a real culture in the music industry comparative to the rest of the arts where a lot of musicians think if I ask for less, I've got a better chance of getting it. That's not necessarily the case, because if you're not budgeting properly and paying things properly, it looks like you don't have an understanding of what it costs. So essentially, if you're getting government money, you should be getting paid. I know in certain professional situations that's not always possible because everything's done on a shoestring, but yeah, it's good practice to make sure that you and the people that are working with you, the other musicians and the arts workers, that they get paid and that it's proper. So just keep that in mind. Okay, as I said, support material is imperative. You cannot have a successful application without the right support material and strong support material. So as I always say, Allison's probably heard me say it a million times, is 1 + 1 must equal 2 in your application. And that sounds obvious, but it's not. A lot of people get it mixed up. So if you say something in the application, the support material verifies what you're saying. It's just a statement if it's in the application. If it's there's something confirming it in the support material, then you're backing up. So you basically need to show, not tell, when in an application. So the great applications you read, it's very systematically just pointed out in the questions, point form, very simple language, and then it's articulated and you can put in your application, see support material for reference, and with quotes, with confirmation of venues and people, anyone involved, and like I said, marketing plans and all the other stuff. So it's important not to be generic with it. So when you're getting support letters, I know it can be a struggle sometimes, but that's what makes a support letter valuable, is that someone's taken the time to give you an endorsement. So it's important to make sure they're up to date. We've seen ones that like are 6 months or a year old. I wouldn't recommend that. Make sure it's relevant. And then essentially make sure that it's tailored to what you're saying. Don't just put random things in there because you think that's going to help. You're basically creating an argument as to why you should get the money over someone else, and you're using the support material as the sort of the rock that backs up everything you're saying. So it's really important. Important also to read the guidelines about what the limits are. So the limits are different for the different programs. In the larger program, you've got more. You've got up to 20 pages, 10 images, and up to 12 minutes of anything kind of video or audio. In the CMF development program, it's 10 pages, 12 minutes and 10 images. So it's just really important that you get that stuff right. There's also certain types of support material that you can use. So with music, it's only YouTube or Vimeo. It's only Bandcamp and it's only SoundCloud. You can't put links to Spotify, Apple Music, etc. And the reasoning behind that is the assessor may not have a subscription to those. So we just have generic formats that you put it in. So it's really important that you adhere to those, because if you put those in and they're not the eligible ones, they get discounted. So you could potentially have an application where no one can hear your music, and that's going to go against you. So really important that you go to the guidelines and stick to what it says in there. Don't go outside of what that is if you want it to be included. So that's really important. Okay, so common mistakes to avoid, as I've mentioned before, the guidelines. It's really imperative. And I think if you're going to understand this process, it's everything you need to know is in there. So read through a few times. It's pretty boring. I'll be straight with you. It's not an exciting read, but it's just you need to understand how this works. It's not like the rest of the industry. It's government, and there's very strict rules about how things have got to be done. Complex descriptions. As I touched on before, this is not a place for you to be creative in your language or your writing. It's a business plan. If you want to talk creatively about your project, and I encourage that, put that in the support material. You can put a page where you can talk about, what inspires you, what's motivating you, what your ideas are. That's great. And assessors like that stuff. You can also do that in video form. We've seen a lot of that. But when it comes to the application, you understand that the people assessing are reading lots of applications at one time, and you don't want them trawling through going, I'm not really sure what's happening. You don't want confusion. So you can even point form. This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. This is how I'm doing it. And this is what's the result of it. This is the outcome. And essentially, those applications are great to read because you know what's happening. Unrealistic budgets, as I touched on before, as long as it's industry standard. So don't think that because it's the government, you can chuck on the government tax and I'm going for the expensive hotel or the, taking liberties, which we do see from time to time. You keep it within industry standard and know that whoever's assessing it knows what things cost. And as long as it's explained and justified, then it's fine. And like I said, it's not about asking for less means you've got a better chance. We want to see an accurate budget. It's really important that reflects what you're doing and represents value, that if the government invests in this project, that there's going to be outcomes that are going to be great for the artist and that more broadly the state. Deadlines, really important. Really, really, really important. So this can be the difference between you being eligible or not. It can also mean it's big on your mental health. Literally every time there's a round closed, there's always people calling up the last minute, stressing about getting in time and sometimes in tears, etc. So the cutoffs are rigid. There's no exceptions. It's automated. So get it in by the time, get it in early. We highly recommend. I just can't emphasize that enough. Like if it's 2 minutes past the deadline, you can't call up and say, it's just blanket, it's automated. So aim to have it in much earlier. And if you need a bit more time, you can give yourself time. The other thing to note that sometimes people will wait and say, I was waiting on this letter or whatever. You're better off submitting without the letter if it means getting it in on time or not. So we've seen that a fair bit.
Yeah, and sometimes we're nice and we'll upload that letter for you after the round has closed.
If it's very soon after, sure.
Yeah.
So yes, but I've seen that before. So make sure you get it in. Activity start and end dates, really important. So you can't ask for funding outside of the start and the end date. So you tell the person assessing what those are. It's not a defined thing. You've got up to a year to do your projects. So if you put this date to this date, then everything you're asking money for has to fall in those dates. It can't be outside. The most common thing we see is, say you're going on a tour and your first show's on a Saturday, the 1st, but you're flying out on the Thursday, 2 days before. People will ask for money for those flights, but put the first show as the date. That's ineligible, because you're asking for money outside of those dates. So what we strongly recommend is if you're doing a tour, put in a week or two before, which can cover off admin and preparation. So you don't have to do it right on the date. Understanding that there's a 28-day turnaround and sometimes that's what it's got to be, but as in you've got a tight deadline to get that in for that date. But it's imperative that you don't ask for funding outside, and that's a really big one. So again, if you're not sure, let us know, but just know that everything in your budget that you're asking for has to be within those 2 dates, the start and the end date. And yeah, if you do that, be fine. Underdeveloped applications, we do see that a bit. It's a lot of work to put in an application. So, and it's very competitive, as Allison said. So don't half do it. If you're going to do it, go all in. Otherwise, wait till the next time, because essentially you'll just waste all your time and waste processing time on this end as well. You see some people say, I'll just have a stab at it. If you're just having a stab at it, the chance of you being successful, highly unlikely. The quality of applications is high, the quality of the projects is high, and every time we do the larger rounds and even some of the sort of smaller grants, there is stuff that should be funded that isn't, just because there's not enough money. So that's the harsh reality of funding. So, and we call that unfunded excellence. So yeah, really, when you're doing your application, too much detail is not enough if you're explaining what you're doing properly. So don't use generic language or generic figures. So but really burrow in on what you're doing. Don't try to use buzzwords like networking, or what does that mean? What does networking mean? That means I'm going to meet with these particular people in the hope to get these outcomes. Generic language doesn't help anyone. It's just a kind of throwaway statement. So be very specific and go into a lot of detail in what you're doing. And you'll have a better chance of explaining or putting a strong case for investment. That's the big key. And then obviously with the support material, too much or too little. So those limits have been set for a reason. It's to ensure that we're giving enough space for you to say what you want to do. But again, too much, an assessor's just not going to read it. And then likewise, if you submit a couple of things, you're not really going to make a strong case. So it's often a challenge. I think as applicants find that challenging to fit in everything, but at the same time, it's all about, trimming the fat and just making sure that the stuff you've got in there is really relevant and really important, and it's sort of selling you, telling the assessor what it is you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. So in terms of some tips to help you write stronger applications, in the guidelines, you'll see each program has a set of objectives. So you need to align with one or more of those. So it's important when you're reading through, have a look and say, does mine do that? And if it doesn't, it's maybe not the right program. So again, you can call and ask one of us, tell us what you're thinking, and then we can kind of guide you in that, which program or which category to go under. But the program objectives are the big objectives that the purpose of the funding is there for. So from a government point of view, the reason for giving out that money is to achieve those larger things. So it's important that what you're doing does that, because at the end of the day, that's the justification for the money. So it's just making sure that what you're doing aligns with that. Keep your responses direct and clear. As I mentioned before, point form is fine. Don't need to use big words, don't need to sound like it needs to be government sounding. We see that a lot. It doesn't need any of that. You just be yourself. An assessor will see your personality in there. And as long as you're explaining it and they like the project and they can see it's well-written grant application, just be who you are and use the language that's comfortable for you, that explains what you're doing. And then, you want to get the assessor excited at the end of the day. And that's around the timeliness and the importance of what you're doing. So, the people assessing are music people or arts people, and they want to see cool things. That's at the end of the day. So put your best foot forward about what you're trying to do and why it's important. As we said before, use high relevant documentation to strengthen what you're doing. Make sure it's current. Don't assume the assessor knows who you are or what you're doing. So you can use quite simple and plain language. Sometimes we see with applicants who have maybe applied a few times, it's different every time you apply, and what you've done before has no bearing on what you're doing now. So just assume that that person has no idea who you are and you're explaining. So another thing we say is, maybe once you've written your application before you submitted it, get someone to read it who's maybe not involved in music or the arts, and just see, does it make sense to the layman? And if it does, then that's great, because then you're explaining things. They're not looking to know if you have any kind of high technical experience. It's just basically showing what you're doing. You've got to hit the criteria, really important. That's the key to a successful application. And yeah, each round is highly competitive, as we mentioned before. So don't be discouraged if you didn't get it. We've had some people, they just apply once, don't get it, and don't apply again. It's as Allison said earlier, it's you're learning a language, and often it's or a process. And we've seen some really good success stories of people that have been really persistent, that constantly call, constantly follow up, always asking questions. How do I make this better? And then those people end up writing really good applications. So it's just a skill if you look at it that way. And the good thing is that it doesn't just apply to our funding. There's many other funding bodies around the country that you can apply the same logic. And at the end of the day, those 4 criteria, they're the basis of any kind of project anyway. You need to kind of, before doing anything, it's good to think about those things so you're aware of what you're doing anyway. So yeah, that's really, have you got anything else on that?
Well, I was just thinking maybe our most important tip is missing from that list, and that's read the guidelines and then read them again and then keep referring back to them. And we say that so many times every day to applicants.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just a really big thing. So how you apply, for those who haven't done it before, you essentially just go onto the website, and there's a portal on there. So you just create an account and then you apply through the portal. So you can actually go right through to the end before submitting. So what I would recommend is have a read through the guidelines, have a go, and write notes as you go along. And then you can write down questions. I don't understand this. What does this mean? And then you can call up and have a really good conversation. You can call up and have lots of conversations if you like, but it's probably better that you go right through to the end, and then you can sort of say, you know, these are the things I want to focus on.
Speaking of contacting us, looking at the remaining time we've got,
Sure.
These are our contact details. So our office number is 6552 7400, and there's about 5 or 6 of us that pick up and answer any of your inquiries.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll go on to some questions. It's probably best if you write them in, or how do you want to do that?
I'm happy to kind of play a bit of kind of refereeing with this, because it's a pretty big group.
Sure.
If participants can put your hands up or type in the chat, that would be great, and then we can pick one at a time. I think we did just have one drop in the chat straight away, but for the benefit of the group, a question from Tess, who's asked, is it recommended for the Contemporary Music Fund when you already have tour dates and venues booked in, or can your tour be funding dependent and you can book dates once funding is confirmed? There's a second question on income, just around, can you count projected ticket sales merchandise towards the 20% contribution?
Okay. Yep. So do you want to?
Yeah. Really, you're getting a score for good planning. So if you can show the assessor that you've got venues and tour bookings and confirmed, you will get a higher score. And yes, if you expect income from merchandise, definitely just do your best guesstimate and pop that into your income in your budget.
Yeah, so just following on from that, as long as with the income you just justify, so don't just say, oh, we're going to sell it out or whatever. You want to kind of use some data or previous experience, or say we're getting this kind of traction in this market or whatever to justify that ticket price. We understand it's obviously a guess because it's before time and that it may change, but you're just looking for a reasonable explanation. And on the part with the booking, you want to take out as much grey as you can to an assessor. So the more you have booked, or at the very least interest from the venue or the booker or whatever in there, as opposed to just saying I'm going to do this, and maybe you've got 4 shows booked, you intend to do 8 and you're working on the other 4, that's okay, but you still want to have the 4 that you have got. So as much confirmed as you can is better.
There's also a question there around getting paid, around, it can be uncommon in music, even compared to other forms of the arts where it can be uncommon there, but especially for music where musicians and industry workers are paid. Do you have any advice on how to kind of quantify a amount for applications to the CMF?
Yeah, so it's always like, that's always a question we get asked a lot, and we can't actually advise what you should and shouldn't pay. What I would advise is you can go, obviously, peak bodies like WAM, or there's other ones nationally that would maybe have rates that they work to. Or, as I said before, it's justifying what things cost. So just say you're using a particular front of house engineer, the standard rate's this, but they charge more. That's fine. Just justify what that is. It's so you could kind of say, well, we're using this engineer, and the reason why we're using this engineer is because they've worked this experience, they've worked with these acts, and they create this sound for us that we need for this. So it's not about what the figure is, it's the justification for the figure.
And also, if you are looking at putting an artist fee in for yourself as a musician, and you're not sure what that rate should be, it's okay to just put in what you think a reasonable hourly rate for your time is, and then calculate that in your notes to clearly explain to the assessor, for example, I think my time doing this particular role is worth $35 an hour. I'm going to be doing it for 10 hours a week while I do this part of the project. And then they can clearly see how you've calculated your artist fee.
I'll also just note that, yeah, look, we're happy at WAM to take some of those questions as well. So if you're looking at rates and you're not sure about what can be included, we might be able to give some advice in a manner that the department can't always do, being so close to the process, around what some of the standards and industry rates are. And particularly for music, we often refer musicians to the Musicians Australia rate, but there's some other equivalent benchmarks that we're able to kind of refer people to and talk you through how they work and how to have a calculation on that. There's a few questions dropping quickly through, so I'll try and get through to them as we can. One in the chat is just the process around feedback on submissions in order to help artists improve, and whether that's a process the department does.
Yeah, I just saw that one pop up, and at the moment we don't have capacity to offer draft reviews or feedback to unsuccessful applicants. And what we're going to do instead is 3 times a year, when our major funding rounds are open, we're planning on doing one-on-one sessions so that people can talk to us about their project. Maybe we can chat about maybe how to make their next application stronger than the last. And our next one is on the 11th of August, and there'll be information sent out about that in the next week.
But you can also call if you want at any time. And just following on that, if it's ineligible, sometimes, because there's 2 stages, there's eligibility and there's assessment. There are notes in the eligibility feedback, aren't there?
Yes.
Yes. So if it is ineligible, you can call up and say, this was ineligible for this reason. Can you explain that a bit more, or something like that? That's fine. So we can try as much as possible. We just don't have a formal process for that.
Thanks. And one of the participants has been helpful enough to drop a couple of those links around pay into the chat. So thank you for beating me to that. Very useful. I might just drop another 2 questions in a row just to kind of try and cover off a few at a time. There was one about whether or not it's permissible to submit applications for multiple grants with the department concurrently. And it might be worth also touching on artists who might seek funding for the same project between 2 different funders is maybe also something connected to that. And there was also a question about whether or not applicants are eligible to apply for funding if the project's already commenced.
Okay, we can't retrospectively fund anything that's already commenced. As Pat explained earlier, you provide us with your start and finish dates, and everything in your budget has to fall between those dates. In regards to submitting multiple applications, again, refer to the guidelines. Most of our grant programs, you can only submit 1 grant per funding round. And I think the only exceptions to that might be if you're an organisation, you might submit 1 to our arts projects, and you might also be looking at a different component of your activity in a regional arts application. But for most of our individuals, the answer is no, you can't submit multiple grants to the same program.
but you can, in that, if you've got different projects, so say you're applying for the CMF development program, if you had a different opportunity, a different project, you can apply for the larger grants, and they don't clash. So in terms of your point about the different funding agencies, you can only get funding for one thing. So essentially, I think you may be referring to maybe Music Australia and a state government one. You can't get funding for two different things, for the same thing, two different funding for the same thing. So if you're applying for different costs, so say you were applying to Music Australia for the recording part of your project and you're applying to the WA government for the touring side of it, that's fine. But what you need to justify in there is if you don't get that other grant, what happens? Because you're going to have a hole in your budget, and that happens quite a bit. So as the rounds sort of overlap, so you maybe have to think, well, if I don't get it, I'm going to get the money from this area, or I'm going to scale my project or change my project where I won't do that component of it if I don't get the money.
But you can definitely apply for funding through other bodies, and the peer assessors in particular like to see diverse income streams in your budgets. But as Pat said, do make contingency plans for what you'll do if you don't get the other funding listed in your budget.
Perfect. There's a couple of questions about the things and costs that can be included in applications. There was one, which is actually something WAM's been doing a bit of research on, around disability accommodation costs for artists, and if there's a kind of guideline about what might be approved, or if there's a process to follow around how to put those in. And there's another around things like childcare and whether or not they can be kind of covered in terms of artist participation.
Oh, absolutely. The answer is yes. So whatever costs your particular project has, pop them in the budget. The guidelines really clearly list what you can't apply for, and that's things like capital equipment, and even the production of merchandise. If you do put that in your budget as an expenditure item, make sure you offset it with income to cover it. But things like childcare and disability accommodation and things like that, or having a carer or somebody travel with you because you need it for your activity, they are legitimate costs. You just need a quote, a confirmation, and pop that into your support material.
And yeah, just as we were saying before, just justify where the rate for that comes in. Like, how did you come up with that figure? And just give detail about that, maybe using a standard rate or whatever. Just say it's this many hours or this many days at this rate or whatever. It just, to provide context.
There's also an interesting part of that to ask whether or not kind of NDIS funds for a person with disability, for them to participate, could be counted as in kind in the grant application.
I'm not sure if that would be income, if it's real money, or if it's a service, it might be in kind. So again, we're happy to speak to individual people about that particular component to give more accurate advice.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Conscious of the time, so I might just go one more, and that's just another income related question. Applying for a grant to support an international mentorship or professional development opportunity. Given that that's a kind of unpaid opportunity, and they won't be getting paid through that, would they budget a wage based on what their usual income is? Or is that maybe something to follow up with a question?
Depends what their income is.
Do you mean it to get the 20%, or just to have the same, just to have a payment rate? Is that what you mean?
I think as a payment rate.
As a payment rate, okay. Yeah, I think that would depend
on how reasonable it is.
Yeah, I think it's a case of when you put the cost of what your time is, it's relevant to the activity you're doing. It's not sort of, you might be a doctor on the outside and it's like, or a lawyer who's getting a really high salary and you want to do this professional development, then that's probably not applicable. It's looking at the value of, remember that whatever you're doing with these grants it's about your professional artistic career. So it's saying, I'm a professional artist going to undertake this activity, and this is what my time in this field is worth. It's not a case of, I want to take time out of my job, which is over here. So it's a different context. So you would have to, again, it's all about justification. How do you justify what that cost is?
That I think the grants shouldn't be an income replacement stream for people to undertake their activities. I think that's sort of the wrong way of looking at what the grant's there to support.
It's the value of you as an artist. So if you were to perform or you were to do something as that side of things, as the artist, what is your value there? And that's what you should be paid.
Well, thanks both. I know there's a few more questions, but I think we had got this closing at 6, so I might just do a quick recap and close and just offer that both WAM and the department are happy to take a call for anything that got missed, although I think we got through the vast bulk of questions. I think you've heard from the department today that they've got a very open door and willing to kind of talk through with you your applications and questions and assist as much as they can reasonably assist while also remaining independent as the process, which certainly WAM's appreciated over time. But also you heard them, pay yourself. So that's something that I think WAM's been screaming from the rooftops, and music's been a lot far behind other forms of the arts in terms of ensuring artists get an income. So please give us a call about that if you want some guidance and advice on it. Can I just say thanks to you both for coming through today. I think the Contemporary Music Fund is really dear to WAM's heart. Having dedicated funding support for contemporary music isn't something that exists in every state, and we're lucky in WA that WAM is engaged with the government kind of through the election campaign, and we're seeing those increases in the funding and a range of other funding coming specifically to contemporary music, and that is fantastic, and it's such a valuable support that government recognises that contemporary music is distinct from other forms of the arts, that it is the biggest form of the arts, but it's also unique in how it operates and kind of deserves its own kind of funding opportunities to be able to run. I'll just note 2 last things, is that we've got WAMCon coming up in September, where we will be dragging Pat out again with this spiel, but along with some contemporaries from Music Australia and from some other funders as well. And there'll be a lot of opportunity to engage with a range of different funding bodies at WAMCon. Those tickets are on sale at the moment, so I encourage you to get in. And also WAM's established a new process for writing letters of support for artists as well. You'll find that portal on our website with a criteria guide in terms of how we write those letters of support. We've found that we've almost had to double or triple the requests that have been coming in the door for WAM this year for letters of support. So if you're interested in us doing that, like the department, we're kind of keen for you to come to us with a bit of notice with those, so we can go back and forth with any questions. But you'll find all that information on our website, and we're happy to help along with our friends at the CITS. So thank you everyone for your time today, and thanks again to the department.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for hosting us.
Thanks. Bye everyone.
Bye everyone.